Albertsimon, the main antagonist in Shadowhearts for the PS2, is arguably the most terrifying in the series. A nightmare made flesh both visually and narratively. Graphically, his gaunt, corpse-like visage, sunken eyes, pallid skin, and skeletal frame evoke an unsettling mix of decay and divinity, as if death itself has taken human form to preach damnation. His transformations into monstrous, godlike abominations heighten the horror. Each mutation grows more grotesque than the last, reinforcing his rejection of humanity. Narratively, he is even more terrifying, a false messiah who doesn't merely kill, but corrupts, twisting love into madness, devotion into fanaticism, and fathers into monsters. His crimes are intimate, his philosophy suffocating, and his god complex absolute, making him not just a foe to defeat, but an ideology to destroy. Simon isn't just evil, he's evil perfected, a villain who makes you fear not just his power, but his twisted conviction behind it. Welcome to Villainalysis. The Macalania incident of 1905 stands as one of the most terrifying and horrifying experiences in Shadowhearts, a brutal testament to Albertsimon's ruthlessness, cunning, and fanatical devotion to his apocalyptic cause. Seeking to summon the malevolent deity, the one who binds three, the Emigre manuscript, Simon orchestrated the complete annihilation of a remote village in Macalania, slaughtering every man, woman, and child in a single night. The massacre was not merely an act of violence, but a ritualistic sacrifice designed to open a gateway between worlds and harness the god's power. Simon's cold efficiency in carrying out this atrocity without hesitation or remorse reveals his utter disregard for human life, viewing people as nothing more than stepping stones toward his grand design. The incident also directly ties into his manipulation of Genma Hyuga, Yuri's father, whom he corrupted into becoming a vessel for Emigre's essence, setting in motion the tragic events that define Yuri's cursed existence. The Macalania incident exemplifies Simon's methodical cruelty, his ability to exploit both living and the supernatural, and his willingness to drown the world in blood for his twisted vision of salvation. It marks him not just as a villain, but as a dark messiah, a man who believes his atrocities are justified just by the godhood he seeks, a belief that makes him all the more terrifying. Albertsimon's domination of Keith Valentine, a powerful vampire and former ally of Yuri, is a chilling display of his ability to corrupt even the strongest wills. Keith, once a notable warrior bound by his own tragic past, is forcibly transformed into Simon's puppet, his body and mind twisted into a weapon against the protagonist. This act underscores Simon's supernatural dominance, his capacity to bend beings of great power to his will, stripping them of autonomy and reducing them to mere extensions of his grand design. This possession also serves as a psychological blow to Yuri, forcing him to fight someone he once respected, further illustrating Simon's cruelty and his talent for turning personal connections into instruments of suffering. However, one could argue that Keith's possession is somewhat underdeveloped in the narrative. While terrifying, it lacks the deeper emotional weight of Simon's other manipulations, making it a slightly less effective demonstration of his villainy compared to his more personal crimes. Simon's cold-blooded assassination of Dr. Elliot is one of the most defining acts of villainy, showcasing his ruthlessness, precision, and complete lack of empathy. Dr. Elliot's death is not just a murder, it's a strategic elimination, as Simon kills him to obtain his silver key, an essential artifact for his apocalyptic ritual. The brutality of the act is magnified by its intimacy. Simon doesn't merely order the death from afar, he personally ensures it happens, demonstrating his hands-on approach to destruction. This murder also serves as the inciting incident for Alice's journey, making Simon's villainy deeply personal for both her and Yuri. His willingness to kill a defenseless scholar, one who posed no physical threat, reveals his moral bankruptcy and his belief that any life is expendable in the service of his goals. This act is highly effective in establishing Simon as a villain because it is is both calculating and deeply emotional, leaving a lasting scar on the protagonist. Simon's true mastery as a villain lies in his ability to manipulate and corrupt those around him, twisting their desires and fears into tools for his own ends. Lily's transformation, for example, is when Lily, the beloved of a party member Zhuzhen, is turned into a monstrous entity by Simon's influence. Her tragic fate is not just physical corruption but psychological torture of Zhuzhen, forcing him to confront the horror of losing her twice, first to madness, then to death. Simon's exploitation of Lily highlights the sadistic enjoyment of suffering that he possesses. As he doesn't merely kill his victims, he warps them into something unrecognizable, ensuring maximum pain for those who love them. Roger Bacon's fall from grace is another example, where once the noble alchemist seeking enlightenment, Bacon is seduced by Simon's promises of godhood, becoming a fanatical servant. Simon preys on Bacon's intellectual pride, offering him forbidden knowledge in exchange for loyalty. This corruption is particularly effective because it shows Simon's understanding of human weakness. He doesn't just overpower his enemies, he convinces them to betray themselves. Bacon's downfall is tragic because it was avoidable, making Simon's manipulation all the more insidious. Genma Hyuga's possession as well, where perhaps Simon's most devastating act was the corruption of Yuri's father Genma. By turning him into a vessel for the emigre, Simon not only destroys a man's soul but also torments Yuri for years, embedding a legacy of suffering that defines the protagonist's entire journey. This act is personal, far-reaching, and irreversible, making it one of Simon's most effective displays of villainy. Albertsimon is a masterclass in villainy because he combines intellectual superiority, supernatural dominance, and emotional cruelty. He doesn't just want to rule the world, he wants to reshape it in his twisted image, and he does so by breaking people first. His ability to exploit love, ambition, and fear makes him a deeply psychological antagonist, one whose evil feels both grand and intimate. However, his effectiveness occasionally wavers in two ways. Some corruptions feel a bit underdeveloped, like Keith's possession, lacking the narrative weight of his other schemes. His god complex, while terrifying, can make him detached in moments where more personal malice would enhance the menace of the scene. Yet these are minor flaws in an otherwise brilliantly crafted villain whose over-the-top nature and hurts not only just the heroes but makes them question their own souls, ensuring that the legacy of what he's done lingers long after his defeat. Albertsimon's downfall in Shadowhearts is not merely the result of Yuri's strength, but rather the culmination of the villain's own fatal flaws and hubris, emotional detachment, and a fundamental misunderstanding of humanity. Yuri, as the protagonist, succeeds by exploiting these weaknesses, turning Simon's greatest strengths into vulnerabilities. Here's a breakdown of the elements that lead to Simon's defeat and how Yuri capitalized on them. Simon's greatest weakness is his unshakable belief in his own divinity. Having spent decades orchestrating his grand design, he becomes so convinced of his inevitable victory that he underestimates Yuri's resilience. His arrogance manifests in several ways, dismissing Yuri as a failed vessel. Simon sees Yuri as nothing more than a flawed son of Genma Hyuga, a tool that outlived his usefulness. He never truly considers Yuri to surpass him, monologuing and revealing his plans. Like many classic villains, Simon cannot resist explaining his motives, giving Yuri crucial insight into how to stop him. Underestimating human bonds, where Simon believes power alone dictates fate, ignoring the strength Yuri draws from his allies such as Alice, Zhuzhen, Margaret, and the rest. Yuri's victory is not just a physical one but ideological as well. Simon's ritual fails because he cannot comprehend that human will, especially Yuri's defiance of fate, can disrupt a quote-unquote perfect divine plan. Yuri's harmonics or powers born from suffering rather than submission become the antithesis of Simon's control. Simon Simon views emotions as a weakness, yet his inability to understand them is what dooms him. He manipulates others through their feelings, like Lily's love and Bacon's ambition, but he himself feels nothing beyond his own grandiosity. This makes him incapable of adapting when faced with raw, unfiltered human emotion, particularly Yuri's rage and grief. Yuri fights with fury, not calculation. Simon expects a battle of wits or magic, but Yuri's attacks are fueled by personal vengeance, something Simon in this wonderful anime-style game cannot rationalize. The power of Yuri's bonds and his friendship versus Simon's forces are extensions of his will, but Yuri's allies and friendship and love and loyalty and justice all are things that Simon dismisses just as trivial. Simon's strength comes from the emigre's power and not his own. Unlike Yuri, who earns his abilities through struggle, Simon's kinda just leeching off a god's essence. He's a parasite. This makes him vulnerable when that power is challenged. While Yuri's harmonixer abilities are self-made, while Simon depends on the emigre, Yuri's fusion monster form is a product of his own soul's resilience, making him adaptable in battle. While Simon's ritual is rigid, Yuri's power is chaotic, but just chaotic enough to stop Simon's plans that require precise steps. Therefore, he was able to win. Yuri doesn't win because he's stronger in the conventional sense. He wins because he embodies everything Simon misunderstands or despises. He embraces his humanity, including pain and rage, while Simon rejects it. He fights for others, while Simon only fights for himself. He defies fate, while Simon blindly follows emigre's prophecy. In the end, Simon's downfall is a poetic justice. A man who sought to become a god is destroyed by a flawed, emotional, and fiercely human adversary. Yuri doesn't just kill Simon, he proves him wrong, showing him the true power comes from endurance, friendship, and defiance, not hollow godhood. Albertsimon's brilliance as a villain is that in his strengths contain the seeds of his own destruction. His intelligence becomes arrogance, his control becomes rigidity, and his godhood becomes a prison. Yuri, in contrast, is everything Simon isn't: adaptable, emotional, and free, making him the perfect force to dismantle Simon's empire of lies and anime. Simon doesn't just lose, he is exposed as a fraud, a would-be deity who never understood the world he sought to rule. Thank you so much, dear viewer, for listening. Subscribe, share, and comment telling me what is your favorite scene of Simon, or who you believe is the best villain of Shadow Hearts, and what you want to see in the next video. Goodbye.